Okay, I see it.
All right, still says setting up your Facebook Live. Ah, and then I see myself. Okay.
All right.
We'll close that.
Nice. There I am.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to GenX Journeys. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun today. And with me is my Gen X Book Club co-host, Suzanne Mattaboni. Hello, Suzanne. and, and today's guest is author Lara Brenckle Malmont. Lara is a Pittsburgh native, a journalist by training, and a lifelong storyteller whose debut novel, Three Rivers Home, is inspired by the remarkable true story of her grandfather's childhood in early 20th century Pittsburgh. What started as a search to better understand her own family history became years of research into a little known chapter of American history, and ultimately a novel that's as much about resilience and identity as it is about the past. So, Laura, welcome to Gen X Journeys. Great to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, and yeah, and I was introduced to you by Suzanne. So you all are part of was the Pen Writers
Yes.
Association? Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Go Polaris.
Yes, absolutely. What's your region, Suzanne?
Well, Area 6 is Philadelphia and the Lehigh Valley,
Okay.
plus areas of like Carbon County and the Poconos. It's very widespread, but it's a pretty big region. So,
Right. Yeah.
so
I'm area, so I'm like the next one over in the central Pennsylvania. So area five rep. They were my area five people and the Wednesday writing group that they put together, Carrie Jacobs and Rob Teplitz. I owe them so much because they gave me so much assistance and help and guidance, and all of the Penn Writers organization did throughout this journey. It really was a journey, and I was so glad and grateful for all the guidance I got along the way.
Well, that's so cool that you actually have regions. I'm in region Rhode Island, so
well, we do have Area 7, which is for anybody who's outside of Pennsylvania and still wants to be in the group.
oh, all right.
Yeah, we love.
want
I
to
mean, the
join.
more the merrier.
Well, a lot of times people will start out in Pennsylvania and they'll retire or they'll move, but they still want to be part of the group. So they created a whole other section, a
Right.
whole other area. So
Oh, that's so cool. Oh,
Yeah.
is there an Area 51?
That's for our mystery writers. And suspense.
right, good.
So, Laura, see, you grew up in Pittsburgh, right? So
Yes.
what was it like for you growing up?
Oh boy, it was the quintessential Gen X experience. I mean, I lived when I was a child, we lived on a about I think 10, 20 acre non-working farm. So it was land, and a house and an old barn, and it had an old stone wall and a creek, and it had like acres of woods. And one of the first stories I told myself was about the magical tree that was in the back of our woods. And my dad would take me back there and he'd put me up in the magical tree. And it was just, I don't know why I called it that. I'm sure it was from some book I read and then it just became a thing. But yeah, that was the start of it. My earliest memories are walking around the, field. Um, I'm sure my mom was probably on the porch or looking out the kitchen window, but I do remember being, not too young and not too old, and wandering around just telling myself stories about different things. A lot of the imagination that I had as a kid involved things I saw on television. I was taking stories from things like I loved the Bloodhound Gang from, what was it, the Electric Company, I think?
Oh yeah. Oh wow, I forgot
Or
about
yeah, or
that.
321, one of those, or 321 Contact. And so,
Uh-huh.
like, some of those folks were some of my first imaginary friends. I'd come up with stories, things like that about those types of things, and it kind of just went from there. As terms of, and I played in the creek with my cousins. We had campfires. We did things that probably kids today don't may not do. But and definitely sometimes unsupervised. Lots of bike riding, lots of roller skating, just your basic quintessential Gen X childhood. But I am a Xennial because I was born in 1978. So I have sort of that one foot in one part of, all my childhood was very analog, and my, about from the time I was about 15 was the emergence of the digital age.
Yeah, yeah. I think technically Gen X is 65 to 80. But
Yeah,
yeah, but I
people
get
start,
it.
yeah, people start
Oh,
stratifying
yeah.
themselves. I'm a millennial, I'm a zennial, I'm, the grand millennial. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a million ways to slice ourselves, but
But
we all have
you were in
common
high school.
experience.
Yeah, you were in high school when all when computers were getting big and everything.
Yep,
So yeah, yeah.
yep. We got our family got our first PC when I was either a freshman or a sophomore in high school. So, and I was when like the English classes I took, it probably wasn't until junior year that the requirement was typing the paper.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I had to do my junior year uh, uh, book project. We had a massive literature review that we had to do, and it was entire year, and you had to do literary criticism. And oh man, it was, go to the library, look up in a catalog, and find these old books and citations and stuff like that. So yeah, it was worth it. It taught me how to research because boy, howdy,
Right.
did I need those skills later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
wow.
Wow, that's so true.
When we used to research, you had to open a book,
Hmm. Absolutely.
find someplace that had microfiche.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, that
Oh, I
was
love
fun.
microfiche.
World.
Yeah. But so, were you always drawn to writing? When did you first start writing?
I think I definitely, like I said, storytelling, and then eventually, I wrote certain things down. I think I was probably about it really started as diary keeping first. I was probably about 9 years old when I read The Diary of Anne Frank, and it just struck me in a way I think it might or struck a lot of kids, especially in our age bracket, that a kid could bear witness to history in a way that was really, really meaningful. And I was like, well, I guess I can just try this. And for some reason, I think it was some book club or something, because my mom had subscribed me for a long time because we lived out in the country. I was part of the weekly reader club, where you'd get like books that arrived by mail, like
Oh yeah.
whatever, every week or whatever. I still have a whole bunch of them. And I think at one point a diary had come with it. It wasn't in any way related to the Diary of Anne Frank. Those are two separate things, but I had a diary and I found it and I was like, well, I'll just start keeping a diary. And I found it really helpful in just kind of getting my thoughts out and thinking about things. And that was the start of writing. And then eventually that transitioned, and probably about fifth or sixth grade was when we started learning about creative writing. And that's when storytelling came through. And I started really, and poetry. It also started off, for whatever reason, with poetry.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. When I was a child, like when I was in like elementary school, even like junior high and high school, I wasn't really a big poetry fan, but just the yeah, just like the Robert Frost, like the the big well known ones. So that's pretty cool that you took to that
Yeah.
so early.
I mean, I definitely probably have to credit my fifth grade teacher at my school, St. John's, Mrs. Pfeifenberger. She was really, really ahead of her time in terms of putting things in front of kids that, I mean, she always felt we kids were old enough to understand things, and she was constantly challenging us to enrich our minds and lives. And she also had a way of making it fun and explaining things. And I struggled with the grammatical part of English. Like, don't ask me to diagram a sentence. I probably still couldn't do it. But once, all the creative aspects of English started to be gradable, I was really, really in. So, and in fact, actually, that was, I would say, probably one of the top coolest things that's happened as a result of this book was just like a couple 2 weeks ago, I actually got to give Mrs. P a copy of my book.
Oh,
And it
Um,
it was really, really meaningful to do that because and I'll tell this to anybody, I was not the A student in English or in a couple of other things. I mean, I really didn't become a great student until I was probably about late middle school, and then high school really helped. But I struggled in English. I struggled with spelling, and it was, not for any lack of wanting to. I just, like so many Gen X women, I am a late diagnosed ADHDer, and I had the exploding locker and the backpack that was always, a mess, and trying to find my homework and things like that. But I was a pleasure to have in class, as so many of us were,
Yeah.
and coming through all that, in spite of it all, it was still something that it meant a lot to me because as we moved twice in my childhood. We moved right before, well, we moved in second grade. So I left Pittsburgh in the middle of second grade. And then we moved to Cincinnati from Hershey, where we went from Pittsburgh to Hershey to Cincinnati. And Cincinnati was the summer before eighth grade, which was about as fun as you can imagine.
Oh wow.
And
Get to be the new kid.
yeah,
Mm.
it was not easy, and the writing and the ability to express myself was essential to, in some, it sounds dramatic to say survival, but it was definitely a part of helping me sort things out. That and reading, 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 reading. I read constantly as a kid.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, well, a lot of people turn to writing to sort things out, to heal. I know I often comment on how many people became writers during the pandemic.
Oh
Because,
yeah.
yeah, you're closed in and you get very introspective and you're
Mhm.
scared, and everybody started journaling and writing, and not just on social media, actually
Mhm.
creating art. So,
Yeah, that was some of the coolest things in the early days of the pandemic where you could tune in and like, you know what, this famous person is going to, well, it's like Mo Williams was hosting drawing classes, and you'd have sing-alongs with children's entertainers, and for a brief shining second the internet was a nice and happy place.
yeah, and all the
yeah.
celebrities were just kind of letting it all hang out. None of them were able to get haircuts, and they couldn't be
Yeah.
Right,
stylists,
right,
and so
Yeah.
right,
everyone's
right.
scrubbing beards, and then it's kind of funny. Everything was online, and they couldn't perform
Right.
Mhm.
like on Broadway and stuff, but they also didn't have all their people around them.
Right, right.
So they were just like us suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember that from, what was it? They still have it in like Us magazine. Celebrities, they're just like us.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So then eventually you got into journalism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So I
I
was.
did. I I was opinionated as well. And so um I sort of channeled that into, I did some editorial writing. I had a column in my high school newspaper. The poetry thing actually was how I first got published ever. I actually got published in the Cincinnati Public Library had a student literary journal called Chalk Dust back in the 90s, and I don't know if it's still around, but in eighth grade, that was when I had my poem published for the first time, and it was a shock to me because nothing like that had ever happened before, but it was incredible, and I really felt like, oh, okay, and not that I necessarily thought that poetry was the life's course, but the idea that writing and expressing yourself and not making, but helping people connect and find points where we had things in common through writing was really exciting to me, and that just grew from there. And yeah, eventually around the time you had to pick careers, some the guidance counselor and a couple of my teachers had suggested that I go into journalism, and I thought about teaching because I love little kids. I babysat. I mean, I read the Babysitters Club as a business journal. It was I set up I set up my own babysitting business. I had a kid kit. I was the premier babysitter for a while, and I took a lot of tips from Ann M. Martin. And that was, but and God bless him because it is a tough job. I had to teach my daughter kindergarten during the pandemic, and oh, I mean, and that she was wonderful, and the school did an amazing job and everything, and it was still a challenge. So I mean, it was tough for me to realize that maybe that's not where my talents lie because my Grammy that I was really close to was a teacher. I had aunts that were teachers. A lot of all the women I admire, a lot of the women I admired were teachers. And I was like, oh God, what do I do? But I am glad that I ended up going to a high school that helped me figure that out. And yeah, once I got on the campus of Ohio University and met the folks at Scripps School of Journalism, I was like, man, I found my tribe.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That feeling, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a great set of skills to have. I mean, it's a tough industry to be in. My friends are still in it. My husband is still in it. It is a vital part of, living in a democratic society. But even if you don't go into journalism, it teaches you how to organize information, how to check facts, how to ascertain whether somebody is being truthful with you, to the best of your ability. And also just the ability to go into a community and learn it in a way that not everybody always gets to. I mean, it's a privilege, and that's something that, as I did that over the course of, I was a newspaper reporter for about 10 years, you pick up a lot of stories. You hear how people talk. You understand what it's like to live a lot of different lives, almost like reading. People say you live 1,000 lives if you're a reader. I mean, a journalist does too because they drop in many ways to people's realities, and the best ones spend time trying to understand that and communicate it in a way that makes sense to others. And I think we do the same with our writing.
Yeah, did you have any like really tough stories? I think tragic, and were there any that were really special and great? Do you have like one of each?
Oh yeah, lots and lots of stories. Some of the things that actually towards the end of my career informed some of the information and the feelings and the sentiments behind Three Rivers Home, my novel, were the cases that I sat in from end to end that involved a death of a child, who was either under CPS supervision or had had CPS involvement. And sitting through those two trials was really, really tough. It was probably some of the toughest reporting circumstances, that I had to do. I also just remember the very first time I had to approach a family, and unfortunately, again, this one involved a child. It was in Chambersburg. Um, my very first newspaper was the Public Opinion, and my God, I'm what, 22, 23 years old. I'm walking up to the front porch, and I can literally, in my mind's eye, still see it. This family had had a fire in their home and they'd lost a child, and I had to ask this person to see if they wanted, and I was fully ready to like literally say, thank you, I understand you don't want to talk to me, and walk away. That was, but this man, I just, for whatever reason, was able to walk up to him and ask him simply, tell me about your son. And he pulled out his wallet and he had a picture, of his little boy in his wallet, and he started talking and he started crying, and, I just kept my mouth shut and let him talk. And sometimes, again, if you approach it in the right way with the right frame of mind, you're you're not wanting to be a ghoul. You're not wanting to be somebody who's, driving the prurient interest. You're trying to help someone remember a piece of something that was lost. And that type of storytelling has always stuck with me. On the flip side, the happy stories, so many of my happy stories involved digging things out that people had forgotten, or random oh, I didn't know it's been 150 years since someone opened that box, but guess what? Laura found the box and now we're going to go look at it. So, I had a lot, I mean, I had a lot of my favorite stories on the flip side too involved preserving things of the past. I had a great story that I loved. It was here at the Patriot News, the members of the East Pennsboro Township High School 59 class of 59 football team. They were like I think they won like the whole state championship. So it was like, they won the thing. And the guys were getting together. They were going to come back to the school and they were going to celebrate it. So it must have been 2009. I think it was like their 50th anniversary. And it was just a great story. Just talking to all these old guys, listen to them relive their lives and their glory days and how they stuck together and that friendships that sustained them over the years. I love talking to veterans and hearing their stories. I mean, it's all part and parcel of the same thing, which was I was the kid that when the old folks started talking was like, tell me more instead of, grandma. I'm really, really glad I listened.
Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, speaking of digging out things from the past, can you tell us a little about your grandfather and how this all started with
Yeah.
your three rivers home?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I never met him. He died when my dad was 17, and he died actually in some ways as a result of the things that happened to him as a child. He became ill as a child when he was living with people who weren't taking care of him, and it damaged his heart valves as he got older. That damage progressed. He died in 1964, which was sort of the advent of heart surgery, and I mean the procedure that would have remedied his problem is a relatively routine procedure today. He needed valve replacement, and that was stem to stern surgery with very questionable outcomes back in 1964. But I never knew him. But I was very close to my Grammy Helen, his wife, my dad's mother, and she was sort of our home base no matter where we roamed around the state or over to Ohio. We were never any more than about 4 hours away from Grammy's house, so that was always the nexus for all of us. My mom's sister and her family lived in Pittsburgh. My dad's sister and her family lived in Pittsburgh, plus my parents' friends. I mean, it was always the place to come back to. Coming home to Pittsburgh always meant something for me. It meant something safe. It meant something constant. And, when I would go to Grammy's house, I also loved, just like anything else, I loved a mystery. And Grammy, she would always tell me that my grandpa Phil, that she thought we were a lot alike, that if he had lived, that we would have gotten along, that we had a lot of the same, characteristics. And so I miss that, that having that again, that extra person who you could be a confidant in and things like that. And so, so I had a lot of questions. Well, what was he like? And, what was his childhood like? And, as a kid, you always wonder, like, what were my parents like? And what were my grandparents like? Or I don't know, maybe, maybe that's just me. Um, but I've been saying I had about 1,000 questions and she had 100 answers, because she didn't know too much. And maybe she did, and maybe she knew more than she was going to tell a 12-year-old, because some of the
Right.
things that I ended up digging out about the things that happened to my grandfather were very difficult. And my Grammy may not even also have necessarily known the words to explain some of the stuff that happened to my grandfather and the foster children and all these other things. But it's also entirely possible that he never talked about it, because neither my father nor my aunt, nor any of the surviving cousins, had really any idea that this stuff that I had dug out, that became the book, had happened to him, except for some of the Brinkle ancestors who had heard the story of how my grandfather and his brother came to be part of the Brinkle family. They knew bits and pieces of it, but some things were just lost until I dug them up.
Yeah.
Wow.
So this is when your investigative skills
Yeah.
kicked in.
Yeah,
Love
always
that.
constantly prowling around my Grammy's house, like pushing things out of the way in closets and um she had an attic upstairs that was like fully, I mean, you accessed it via stairs, not one of those little ladders. And I mean, we played up there all the time, and she had things in closets, and I just pull them out and just rifle through them. I learned to be an archivist, and I would very carefully, like, I'd take one thing out, put it on top of the other, then I'd put it all back the same way I'd found it. So, but I did. It was during one of those digs that I found the picture that I have of my grandfather. He's probably about 16 or 17 in the picture. And at the time, it was the youngest photo. I'd only ever seen a photo of him as an older man, towards the end of his life. But it was such a happy picture. He's like squatting down, and he has this great big grin on his face, his little dog in his arms. He's clearly on the farm where he ended up growing up with the Brinkles. And I kept it. It went with me to every house I lived in. It went with me to college, and he's just always sort of sat on my shoulder, in some way. And and Grammy humored me too, I think. And but I told her, I said, Grammy, I'm going to come back to Pittsburgh. I'm going to figure it all out, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And she's like, yes, honey, in the ways that Grammys do. But she believed me. She believed in me. She was an avid newspaper reader. She read, I mean, the Pittsburgh Press and the Pittsburgh Post Gazette were delivered, daily. And it was she would read them cover to cover. She watched the news. She had the news radio on all the time. She was an avid consumer of news and information, and we had a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think it's fascinating the way, well, it wasn't really until I was an adult that I kind of got any kind of history on my grandparents. They were just kind of, you just feel like they're older than you, and they've always been older than you, and that's just, that's them. Like you never think to yourself that they had things that they struggled with when they were younger, and things that were obviously much more difficult than what we struggled with. And in learning about my grandparents, I was shocked at like how many things we had in common, like things that I know at this point I inherited from them, from especially from my my grandfathers, who were all kind of workaholic, I- like the work ethic I think came from them, and things that they were talented at, or things that certain standards that they had about, work and being precise and, all this kind of stuff. I think I didn't really realize where that came from, because my parents were, there's a lot of differences between myself and my parents. And I always just assumed, oh, that's just generational. But I think it's just certain things skip a generation, and you don't realize it until you do that digging.
Hmm.
And say, oh man, this letter from my grandfather's boss could have been written to me,
Yes.
like me, or hearing things about like a great grandmother that I had, who, like, women didn't have a lot of options on any way to get money, and she was, I think, left with like 10 children or something. She would sell her hair
Oh, wow.
for
Wow.
wigs because she had
Hmm.
long Italian hair, and I was like, like I dyed my hair red, but it was this long, very long, sleek black hair, and I
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
you know. That's kind of my just
Oh,
Right.
things like that, like, wow, really.
yeah.
You just things echo over the generations, and you don't realize it, and unless you have that curiosity, and until you start uncovering those things and opening those boxes, like you said. Very neat.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's some of I mean, not only does doing this type of research, even if, I mean, there's the research of just like finding bits and pieces of the past, and then there's, the genealogical aspect where you are actually going through and trying to piece together an entire family line and looking, birth certificates, death certificates. I mean, it's an explanation for a lot of things. I mean, at the very least, it's helpful when you go to your doctor and they ask you, well, what's your family history? And in some ways, that was also, one little part of it, not being able to answer too much beyond, well, I'm pretty sure my grandfather died of a heart attack, but I don't really know much beyond that. Um, that's more important now than ever. But, you can also just see how, yeah, like you said, these patterns of behavior kind of develop. I was really interested when I thought about it to learn that, like, my grandpa Phil, his father was a tailor, and I'm a writer. My grandfather did a lot of, I mean, he wasn't necessarily anything. Well, one of the things he did like to do, and toward the end of his life, it was something, unfortunately, that kind of never got off the ground, but he was really well known for making baskets at the like food baskets at the grocery store where he worked in downtown Pittsburgh. It was called Donahue's. It's like basically think of like Wegmans.
Sure.
And so he made the fruit baskets, and people would, they'd go to there and they would, request them early. And he made these big, beautiful bows and all these other things. And, I was like, oh, okay, well, all of that, the tailoring, the basket making, the writing, it's all creativity within a set of guidelines. Tailors have, I mean, you have to measure, measure twice, cut
Right.
once, and with all the clothing, but within that border, you can create something beautiful. And the same thing I think is true for writing and also for maybe making baskets. It really was. If he had been able to live long enough, he could have been the Harry and David before Harry and David.
Oh, that's so true.
So, but it is.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us too now. I mean, things are what they are right now, and finding that comfort in the past and in ways that's not just like looking backwards, but sort of like finding that old friend, that people have survived tougher times, harder times, more difficult circumstances, and have come through. Not always perfect, not always without scars, but they've come through. And I think that's helpful for a lot of folks, especially now. I've really started noticing that there's a lot of that the based on a true story of the author's family history is kind of having a moment in historical fiction.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I, I hope
And,
it continues.
that history is really crazy. Grandfather went through a really lot when
Yes.
he was a child. Do you want to talk about that? Because I was unaware of this happening in this country. So,
Yeah. So my one of the key reasons why the story that inspired Three Rivers Home became more than just a family story was because what had happened to my grandfather. He was orphaned as a child. He lost both of his parents. Him, his older sister, and younger brother were left initially first with family members, and then when the family members passed away, they were then put into Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Allegheny County, Pennsylvania is the county in which Pittsburgh, resides. So Allegheny County, their sort of rudimentary foster care system was called the Juvenile Probation Department. And back then, they didn't make a distinction between children who were dependent, like my grandfather and his siblings, and children who were delinquent, kids who were truant or, had got caught stealing or something along those lines. And there was also no social safety net in which, we currently understand it. And so single mothers or single fathers would sometimes use county custodial services as a type of extended daycare. I mean, I think all of us have probably heard that, mom left them in the home and then went away and came back. Sometimes people would be
Mm.
in and out of orphanage. Well, the county said, well, if you're going to use this like this, and there's nobody to pay if you're not going to pay us for your kids, we're going to put your kids to work. And uh, it was a scheme called farming out, and that's pretty much it is exactly as described. A lot of these children were sent to work as farm hands mostly, but also it was factories. I mean, Pittsburgh had, thousands of factories, glass factories, coal mines. Girls a lot of times were sent to be domestic help. And so the county said, we'll put you got to earn your keep if nobody's going to pay for you for us to keep you. So my grandfather and his brother, with no one to pay for their upkeep, were rented by the county for $5.60 a week each. So if
Wow.
a
Wow.
family took in, 7, 8 kids times $5.60 per kid per week, you're doing all right.
Hmm. Wow.
Um,
You don't have to hire staff
yeah. And
and
it's
hands. Yeah.
yeah, and it was not something that was really discussed. In post as I, started digging around post writing the book, I really was trying to find if I could find instances where the county discussed this practice in the open. And so far, I mean, I guess I haven't conducted a full and exhaustive review of every single newspaper, but I did a lot of digging, and it really didn't come up until 1922, which was in December of 1922. My grandfather and his brother and the six foster siblings that were living at the home where they were, the Brinkle home, or they'd been sent by the county. The home burned to the ground 2 weeks before Christmas. And my grandfather and his brother survived. Two foster children did not. And uh, allegations were made subsequent to the fire that created a motive. And then there was a coroner's inquest, and the fire made front page news, and then the allegations, which involved sexual assault and abuse of some of the children, not my grandfather or his brother, in this instance. But it exploded across the front page of all the newspapers in Pittsburgh for 6 weeks, and then it made it out even into I found things on newspapers.com, into the hinterlands where, it was showing up in newspapers in like, yeah, in like Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Ohio, where, like the little blurbs from the Associated Press back then. But my grandfather had to testify. 15 years old, they put him on the stand. He had to testify about, what happened and what he saw and how he escaped from the fire that night. And the first time I found that, I darn near fell out of my seat because the story, like I sort of said, started. I did move back to Pittsburgh in 2006. I got a job for one of the Pittsburgh newspapers, and my office was in the Allegheny County Courthouse. And one day, one summer day, I was having kind of a tough day, and I just kind of put my head down on my desk before the day started and was like, I don't know if I can do this. But that picture like floated up behind my eyes, and it hit me all at once. I was like, oh my God, every answer I could ever want is literally 3 stories below me. And I leapt up, and I had about a half hour until my shift started. So I ran to the first place I figured I could go, which, being a county government reporter, came in handy because I ran to the Register of Wills office, and I said, hey, can you check these names? Because I did know my grandfather's name before he was adopted. He was adopted at 16. That was, never a secret or anything like that. So and sure enough, we found something. Found a will that my great grandfather had written that we never knew existed, and we were off from there. That summer, I dug through, and again, I found a cool story. I found where my great grandparents were buried. I even learned about the farming out aspect. That was stunning to me. And then that's kind of where it ended. And then I left Pittsburgh. My husband and I moved here for both of our jobs. And so then we got married. We, got all, we were just the whole 9 yards with the wedding. We got all that done. And then somewhere about in 2009, 2010, I just started picking around the edges of the story again. And I knew about the farming out, but I did not know about the fire. And so one night, my husband, because he's a photojournalist, and he was like at Friday night football in the fall, and I was home alone, and I just started Googling my grandfather's name and my great grandfather's last name and doing misspellings, because that was pretty frequent. And then this article popped up, and it says cause of fatal Brinkle Farm fire not fixed. And I said, excuse me. The what now? And come to find out that, I learned about the fire that had happened, and the trial, and that my grandfather had to live through. And that is when the idea of, oh, this is a lot more than just my family story. This involves other people's stories and other families, and also a moment in time where the era in which the story takes place, there were reforms from that we know, now as part of the progressive era, but they were just starting. It was this interim period where some things were moving forward, some things hadn't happened yet. And in the middle of all this was a little boy who was just trying to figure out where he belonged in the world, which I think a lot of folks can relate to that.
Mhm.
And he was a
Wow.
little boy when my grandfather was sent to go live with his foster family that eventually became his adoptive family. He's the age my daughter is now. I mean, I look at her, she's 12 and a half. I look at her and it makes me sad for him all over again, the little boy that, I mean, I can't even fathom something like that happening to my daughter. But also on the other hand, I can very easily imagine it because, it's not just other people's children. There are kids that are going through a lot of that and worse today. And, I'm as cognizant of that as I am. I mean, it's because of my grandfather's story that I care so deeply about things that happen to kids today.
So it was like when you were starting to research this, when you discovered all that between
Hmm.
the fire and the farm and the kids. That's
Yep,
well,
yep.
you just took that one step, and then all of a sudden, everything else starts opening up.
Yep. Yeah, I once I found that one little section, I spent about one Thanksgiving. I ended up going to Pittsburgh and stayed with my cousins, and I spent about 3 days in the Carnegie Library at the microfiche, docs,
Hmm.
just spinning that wheel, looking for
Yeah.
stories.
Mind numbing.
Yeah, yeah, you're sort of just get a little woozy, from the spinning, but I found I felt like every 5 minutes I was calling my mom, going, "Guess what I found? Guess what I found? You're not gonna believe this." And um, and that was it was also something that was as I looked into it and saw, all these other families, all these other lives that intersected, my own families, that starts to become a responsibility too. I mean, that's the reason that it's based on a true story. There's only so much truth that I could get to the heart of. I mean, even though eventually at one point, some of the Brinkle relatives actually found a stash of letters from my grandfather to his then still foster mother, that filled in a huge missing piece of the story that we didn't even know. In fact, it was one of the few things that had come down through history almost unaltered, which was Grammy always told me the reason that my grandfather had gotten sick as a child was because he was living with the uncle in Ohio. Well, there was indeed an abusive uncle in Ohio, and he's come down through history as that. That whole thing about, who lives, who dies, who tells your story, and the deeds that you do kind of live after you. Yeah, it's true.
In this research, like you're finding all these other people. Have you ever contacted other family members that might have gone through this, or it might be a lot just for you yourself.
Yeah.
So instead of diving into somebody else's story, but
Yeah, I mean that's part of the responsibility. Like, I mean, genealogy, I mean, you start rattling around. I mean, it's one thing to rattle around in your own closets and dig up skeletons. It's another thing to rattle around in other people's closets and start
yeah,
moving their stuff
exactly.
around. Um, I mean, I have a blog about it. I clearly have a book about it. I mean, the way that I've always handled it is if any of those family members had ever wanted to get in touch with me, to talk to me, you know, I I would share the information that I have. But, some people had asked me like, well, the story of the girl whose sister was in the two girls that were there. That is, that's a story. I'm like, that's not my story. That's their family's story, and they may have a completely different take on it. In fact, I would bet they would because even the difference between how girls were treated and things that happen to girls and things that happen to boys, and how boys were treated, I mean, it everybody has their own story, and I know that what my story is, so that's the story I chose to tell. But yeah, I you do have to be very careful when you're starting to do research like that. You do have and you have a responsibility to the people who are alive today. It's like you see these stories where people do the ancestry tests and then they discover, gee whiz, grandma's father was not her biological father. Do we tell grandma? Grandma's 85. Um, I've sort of always come down on the side of you've got the responsibility to the people who are alive today and what that information can do to their lives. If somebody asks you a direct question, well, maybe that's a different story, but to
Hmm.
just suddenly spring it on someone, that may require a different, and other people may have different feelings about it. There may be so many different extenuating circumstances where it's vital that people understand, like, oh, you are part of a group or an ethnicity that has a particular predisposition to cancer, and or a
Hmm.
certain genetic conditions, and you need to know that because you've got to make sure that you're screened for it appropriately. I mean, that's a huge issue. But again, you gotta the way that are you, and also too, are you the one to tell the story? Yeah, there's a lot of that conversation of, are you the one to tell the story? I mean, even just with writing books.
Yeah. I love that. I'm glad I asked
I'm trying to tell the story without giving too much of the story
Right.
away,
Yeah.
because
Um, Wait, you were doing the research. Did you feel like your grandfather was leading you to like clues as well?
sometimes, yeah,
Uh-huh.
sometimes. It would, and I mean, people can think what they want about that, but I did. There were times when I really did feel like I don't know how I know this, but I know it's right. As I'm describing something or visualizing an area, um, a lot of times I would do a little bit of research and then I do more research and like all the things would start adding up. Or I would say, oh, well, I think their relationship is going to be like this. Like, for instance, the relationship between my grandfather and his sister, his older sister. She wrote some of the letters that were in that packet that were found were a couple letters from the boys back to their sister. And I was like, oh, I really did kind of capture their relationship, but how did I know that? And, things like that. I mean, I did. I did feel sometimes, and I even did have a moment, and I'd heard people like at the Pen Writers Conference and things talk about like you don't know where your characters will take you, and I was like, how do like you're the author? How do you not know where your characters will take you? But then there was a moment, and it was when I was writing the chapters in that are set in Bel Air, Ohio, towards the latter third of the book, and I was writing through it, and I knew all of a sudden that I had to do something that I was like, I literally went like that. I was like, no, no, don't make me do it. Don't make me do it. But it ultimately felt right. And I did. So that, but I also had one other interesting thing happen, just this past December. I never had a dream about my grandfather. I sort of never figured I would because I didn't have any living. I've had dreams about my Grammy and my other set of grandparents and other folks who've passed away, but I didn't have a living memory of my grandfather. So there's nothing that the sleeping brain can draw on per se. But December 14th, and December 14th was the the fire happened December 13th into December 14th. So when I woke up on December 14th of this 2025, um, I had had a dream about my grandfather, and it was a great dream. We were standing on the street corner in downtown Pittsburgh, and we were talking, and I heard his voice, and I can't. I can't even tell you what it sounded like. I just knew it sounded right. And I was holding his hand and I was telling him, like, come on, we're gonna go. We gotta go see Grammy. Everybody's waiting for you. And like the last thing I was aware of before I woke up was like I was holding his hand, and in my dream I go, oh my God, I'm holding his hand. And then I woke up. And it was a great dream. It was a fabulous dream. And I take that, in my spiritual path. I take that as a little sign, a little acknowledgement of, those who are gone from us never truly are gone forever. I that's
Certainly, yeah.
that's that's why I like historical fiction and preserving these little known stories, is because they are so important to the fabric of who we are, as a nation, as a city, as a community, as different types of people. That we're all, I mean, people like you said, people are the same. People are kind of the same from age to age.
It's true. And the way that we preserve it is people like you and me and Paul who sit and create these characters either based on people that we know or
Hmm.
even that develop from the lives that we lived and such. I always think to myself, it's really fascinating. We know what people were like in ancient Egypt
Oh
because
yeah.
some guy, carved stuff into a wall and wrote
Hmm.
about it. We know. It's
Well, there was just an article that they found this cuneiform tablet, and it was and the it was a letter of a kid home to his mother from school, and he was basically like, "My clothes are awful. The other kids have better clothes than me. Why don't you give me better clothes?" And I'm like, "Oh my Lord."
Yeah.
And this was like BCE. This was thousands of years ago, and it's still like, "Mom, get with the program."
But when I was
Or
growing up, or even when I was a little older, I was not from a really religious household, so I had not ever read the Bible myself, despite going to church now and then, I guess. And I was always, the older I got, the more afraid I was to read it because I thought I was gonna like point out something terrible that I was doing that I really
Uh,
wasn't doing. But then in college, I took a course, the Bible is literature,
oh,
mhm.
and had to, kind of read it objectively and was just like, people are exactly the same as they were. Like, they're
Mm.
people like, that guy has three goats and I only have one. I want two more goats. So I can read everything. Like they're just, everybody's, covering each other's wives. And this is just all
hmm.
like one long soap opera. And, human beings just don't change that much as we, claim to be evolved. Just that's what struck me. I was like, this
Right.
is what I was afraid of. It's like
Yeah.
Right, right.
it's like it's like people who live next door to me. It's all the same.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, a lot of stuff that was happening then is still happening
Yes.
today. So yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know, but so many things have changed from the technology to the
Hmm.
economy and the state of s- struggle as far as I mean I see this as it's an immigration story to
Hmm.
me as much as anything else, as they were all like kind of first generation, or
Yeah, very
not
much
even like
so.
pre first generation Americans.
Hmm.
And but, I have stories of that in my family as well. Uh,
Hmm.
but people still have the same, human nature, I think, is what remains the same.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Oh,
Exactly.
millennia, yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it
Well,
is
what's
fascinating.
what's the thing they always say that there's only two types of stories in the world is what is it like a stranger comes to town and a man goes on a journey and like
Hmm.
the
There you
whole
go.
of literature is
Right,
based
or
on those two
boy versus
stories.
girl, boy against girl.
Right. But
Or
but yeah,
vice
I mean,
versa.
and that's another reason why the broader view of what it means to come here, and try and make a life for yourself. Yesterday it was my grandparents and I mean all of my family, like my Grammy Helen's family was a family of Slovak immigrants. She was first generation. My grandpa Phil was first generation Italian American. My mother's family, her grandfather, I think, was the first generation, but her grandmother was I think like second or third. But I mean, it's this whole different thing. Then you start reaching back even further. My mom's grandmother's family was part of a German settlement in New York during the American Revolution. They'd immigrated here and then they went back
Wow,
to
yeah,
Germany
that's
and then they came back again. So, I mean, you have all, and then you have the, waves and waves of people who are coming from all sorts of places, today. And I think you find those same stories of people who care for their families, who want a better life for their children, who want to build something outside of the strictures of whatever they're leaving behind. And in some cases, like they say, some people that you don't take to the sea unless the land isn't safe. And that is a huge part of, a lot of journeys of our
motivator, yeah.
ancestors and folks today. So, I take a little bit of a broader view of the fact that, like you said, the stories are similar and you don't have to be Italian American to get this, to get what's in Three Rivers home. You don't have to be from Pittsburgh to get what's in Three Rivers home. It's a vehicle and it can be what home is for you and for what your family is for you.
That's true. but I am an Italian girl, and to me, the
Yeah,
Italian
I mean, clearly,
story
we're
was
clearly.
wonderful. Yeah, I wouldn't for a minute deny that everyone's story has that kind of certain parallels
Hmm.
because so many of us our families have come from other places, no matter where in the country you are.
Hmm.
It's just we're a new nation. But the Italianness of this story really kind of
Yes.
hit me.
Yeah,
So,
it was very meaningful to me. A couple of folks who were the beta readers, and then some folks subsequent to that read it. And I didn't grow up with that deep culture because of what happened. We lost that link to the old country. My actually one of my friends, Linda Schifino, she wrote a book called Neighborhood Girl, and it's a series of essays about growing up in the same neighborhood, East Liberty, where Three Rivers Home, the first part of it takes place. And it was so interesting for me to read that book because it was almost like looking at like, oh, this is what the childhood that my father might have had, if my great grandparents had lived, this surrounded community with, all these different traditions and, people in and out of each other's pockets. And in a lot of ways he did. It was just a little different. I mean, he had lots of my father grew up with, his aunts and uncles and cousins and dozens by the dozens around him on, all sides of the family. But, it was just something very specific. And then what that would have looked like for my growing up, you moved into like Linda is around the same age my father is, born in the 40s. And so, like, some of this anecdotes she shares about her children, growing up in the 70s and 80s. And I was just like, wow, that is really, really interesting to see what that was like on the other side. And the Italian American community is something that is uniquely interesting in the American experience. And that was also something I was interested in exploring was kind of digging into those roots. And I learned a lot of things and gained some things back that were sort of lost over those broken links, which was really, really nice.
cool.
Did you come across things that you would have liked to include in the book, but yeah, it wouldn't fit? Did things like that you felt bad leaving out? You don't have to give details, but
Right. I had a few things that were more made up than anything else that I enjoyed writing. They were fun to write, and so I ended up taking them out in the interest of pacing and things like that. I mean, I probably could have written 600 pages because for me it was really interesting to just constantly keep spending time. The time I spent with it was the time I was in some ways spending with my grandfather and spending time with other members of my family as I invented these characters that were I believed like my grandfather or like my great grandfather. And a lot of my writing when I was a little kid it was some of that. I mean, because of the moving, because of being away from my friends, and we didn't have Facebook. A long distance call cost money,
yeah.
and your parents
Well,
didn't let you just hang on the phone with a long distance forever.
Yeah.
It was writing was also a way to connect back, sometimes create alternate realities where I was in charge and I made all the decisions. Um, but also too just sometimes sort of spend time with a piece of the past that was felt far away. And writing was a way to bring it a little bit closer. That's sort of why the tagline I have on like my marketing materials and stuff is stories that call us home. And I think that's a pretty solid theme for a lot of the things that I enjoy writing most about, how people find and define home, what it means to
uh,
belong.
that's insightful.
yeah.
And the concept of home almost is something that in its own way becomes transient. Like there's
Hmm.
I'd heard a line of someone saying that when you're a young person and you're out on your own, you are homesick for a place that doesn't exist yet. You
Hmm.
haven't created that new home. But yet there's always the concept of home being, say, where you grew up, not the house that you were explored your whole youth in.
Hmm.
So it's it's very meaningful in a lot of ways. So
Yeah. And if you have multiple, like, the home that my parents live in now is not the home I they brought me home from the hospital too. It's a home that they bought, number of years ago, and I mean it's a lovely home, but it's like and I think about all the different homes I've had over the years, the apartments I lived in by myself, the group home, I lived in when I did my study abroad program, and I lived with like all of my classmates, and we had an amazing time, and those types of things. And it took me a long time to understand that home is something you have, and it's also something you can build. And I think that there's one's not right over the other. People find the people who feel like home to them and what those families and entities look like. Again, it's about what's safe, what's, protective, what makes sure that you are able to function at your best self. That's home. And blood doesn't, and in fact, actually, I mean, that's one of the things that you kind of find in Three Rivers Home is Frankie's blood lets him down. And I'm not saying that that's, necessarily any indictment on my personal family.
Right.
It's just, I mean, number one, I mean, the truth is, my grandfather's uncles really did let him down. And that it was a family that he found through this very bizarre set of circumstances that ended up being, a positive force in his life. And it's representative too, the fact that, as a city in terms of Pittsburgh, any big city, or small city, our hometown can let us down, but it can also lift us up. And, you could come in Pittsburgh, especially, you got that fighting steel spirit. So, Philly has it too, Boston has it, I mean, there's all sorts of pockets and places where, I mean, where Italian ancestors settled, but just other places that are really, really meaningful and have a hometown pride. But again, there's like you said, there's something about Pittsburgh, there's something about Italian American. It's like all those things lining up together were unique in and of itself and spoke for more than just that.
Yeah. Another thing that stands out to me is, you had to be resilient to survive, and it's just like us Gen Xers, we're known for our resilience and
Right.
creativity. So yeah, so we got that little connection there too.
Absolutely. I remember reading something like eons ago that our generation, and it was probably in that same raft of commentary that we had when we were like in high school, where they're like, you're going to be the first generation that doesn't do as well as your parents, and
Hmm.
oh, you slackers, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But that we would have more in common with our grandparents, who were like part of that silent generation, but that
Hmm.
like strong resilience. Because you do, I mean, especially now as we're getting older, what do you see that stereotype becoming? The Gen Xers don't complain. They got their heads down and going, oh my God, I can't believe you guys are worried about this.
Hmm.
And I mean, and again, I mean, it's a stereotype. How, we laugh about it. And I mean, this, there's a point of pride of being part of a generation that is seen somewhat as like resilient, a little feral, a little free range, a little don't poke the bear, which is hilarious. Um, but I mean, like we said, people are people, and
Yeah.
there we do have more alike. Than we do that, we're more alike than we think, more alike than we are different.
I
Hmm.
do. I remember my grandparents saying the same things to me as I'm thinking about young people now.
Get
It's
off
like,
my
I'm
lawn.
so glad I don't have to grow up in your generation, Sue. My grandfather would say to me. So everything's so complicated now. And, like he had no idea what was coming. But, like
Yeah.
I'll look at my daughter's generation, or even like the kids younger than her, because
Mhm.
she's married, she's in her early 30s. But, how often do we look at young people now? I would hate to grow up and have to be, and, have deal with that onslaught of social media. How are
Mm.
they doing it? But seriously, my grandparents almost word for word said the same things to me about the
Mhm.
world that was kind of left to us Gen Xers, so
Yeah.
maybe it's all just a different challenge, but
Yeah, that's
hey, the challenge, there's still a challenge, even if
y-
it's a new challenge.
yeah, and like for Grammy, like she loved airplanes. Like they fascinated her. And so like her house in Pittsburgh was kind of in the flight path. Once Pittsburgh Airport was built, the jets would go over and she would watch them go all the time. And it's kind of funny the plot that she has the cemetery overlooks the airport, and
Uh,
I'm pretty sure it was like picked because it had a
by
nice view.
design. Yeah.
But I mean, she was born in 1915, so that was just like 11 years what past the Wright brothers, and now she lived through the jet age. I mean,
Right.
she didn't have a computer, but by the time she passed away when I was a sophomore in college, I was sending emails and she had digital cable and all these things. So and that was a huge change in her life. But I also sort of realized in writing the story that there it's only in looking backward do we sort of build this understanding of like, oh, it was always going to work out like this. It was always the arc is, A to B, all these different paths in between, but eventually we all get there. And going through it almost sometimes day to day with my grandfather made me realize that sometimes strong isn't a choice. Strong is what you realize you were when you're past it, and you just keep trying to make the next right decision. And there's no guarantee on the other side that you've made the right decision, but choosing not to do something is the only way that you're sure that that nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And so,
Yeah, yeah.
and it was interesting for me to see that too, because I did want to try and temper, what I was writing. It's like these are everyday heroes. I think all of us feel like we have family members that are heroes, and heroes aren't necessarily just, these people in capes or doing great things. It's just like the people who get up every day and do the job they're supposed to do, or the dad that keeps going to work every day, even though he's, sick and miserable, which is what happened to my grandfather as his health started to fail. And my father at 16, 15, had to go and help his father at work keep his job because again, no social, it was barely the start of Great Society, when he died. And my dad was going to school and then, like, but before he went to school, he'd ride the bus with his dad in the morning downtown. He'd cut the ice blocks because my grandfather by then was the frozen food manager. He'd cut the ice blocks and carry them upstairs because my grandfather had congestive heart failure and he couldn't barely get through the day. Um, you know, that's a hero. That's my grandfather's a hero for going to work every day. My dad's a hero for going with him and doing that work for him. And he's never stopped. He's never stopped taking care of the people around him. That kind of thing leaves a trace on you. And all of us are sort of products of that. But that making that choice every single day is the thing that, in retrospect, looks heroic, but in reality is just a good person trying to make a good decision. And that in of itself is interesting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautifully said. All right, so we should start wrapping things up. We'll do some fun things. But I'm on a journey to run a race in all 50 states, and I haven't done Pennsylvania yet. But I, but I think it when I do a Pennsylvania race, actually probably be kind of close to your neck of the woods, Lara, with
Oh,
the Amish country because
oh
I
yes,
love
yes.
going there. But if I were to decide to go to Pittsburgh, I love to find the local cuisine. So, what's your favorite Pittsburgh food? What are they
Oh
known for
gosh.
there?
Well, we make homemade pierogies, so that's like, homemade
Oh,
in our home kitchen. But Mancini's,
Pierogies.
yes. But I mean, but Mancini's bread, staple in our family. It's in McKees Rocks. Absolutely the best bread, hands down. Pillowy, oh, I can taste it. And the pepperoni rolls. So yeah, and so that's a family staple.
uh huh. Right. And who is your favorite Saturday Night Live cast member?
That's
Let's get into this.
That's a tough one. I mean, it's a solid tie between Gilda Radner and John Belushi.
Oh yeah,
Very,
yeah,
very old school.
yeah. I love that when we
Yes,
first spoke.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that when we first spoke. You had mentioned that the original cast you were really drawn to.
Yes, absolutely. That's
Yeah.
that could float back as a book of its own. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I very, very much I I'm a connoisseur of the first 5 years of Saturday Night Live, I would say. But big fan of the show, and really found a lot of, again, it was just sort of an interesting collection of people caught in a very interesting set of circumstances those first 5 years, starting something new and being brave enough to jump up on stage and say, you know what? Why not me? And I actually we have a fantastic Halloween party at my office every year, and my little group we actually won the costume contest this year, and I was Rosanna Dana.
Oh, that is great.
I love that.
My hair was huge. It was awesome.
Wow.
Same as
And
Dan.
but yeah.
Um, so, what was your favorite? What book series would you recommend for Gen Xers that you grew up with?
Oh boy. I mean, how if you haven't picked up the VC Andrews book, you
Oh,
you're missing out, maybe. Especially like the first like seven books that were actually written by her and not the ghostwriters. I mean, that's a huge one. I was a huge fan. I mean, I was a little late to the game, but I was a huge fan of. I mean, talk about going from the ridiculous to the sublime, and I read everything from that. And I was a big fan of the American Girl books. I love the American Girl series, which seems insane when you put the two of those things together. There's a whole lot of reading that happened
a
between
lot of
those two things.
contrast, right?
But
I love the
but
American Girl books.
yes.
Now I read them as an adult too,
Hmm.
when my daughter was really little. But then they came out, all the dolls and everything made me crazy, like all those really expensive dolls.
Oh
Like
yeah. Oh
you
yeah.
like go into New York City and they would sell you like a $60 pair of pajamas for the doll, and then you had
Right,
the more
right.
expensive matching version of the pajamas for the child, which
Oh
actually
yes.
but the books were excellent.
The
And
books
that's
were
the writer, the
excellent.
books were excellent. A lot of those were
Yes.
like immigration stories also.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
all the especially the original ones that came out of the desire by Pleasant Rowland to create something that was for the girls who were not into Barbie. I was one of those girls. I had zero interest in Barbie. I mean, I did My Little Pony, I did She-Ra. I was a huge fan of when She-Ra was rebooted a couple of years ago. My daughter loves it,
Huh?
and it was. I mean, I thought it was so fabulous and so well done in the keeping the spirit and building on the spirit of the original without just completely rehashing um, what the one I grew up with. But yeah, but that was what I really enjoyed about those books, and that I learned something. That those sections in the back where they talked about, well, like building the world of Samantha or building the world of
Yes.
Kirsten, it was fabulous
We love
to me.
Kirsten.
But yeah,
Kirsten's a favorite.
those were some favorites of series wise.
All right. What was your first concert?
Oh God. It's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. Yeah, it's very embarrassing. Very, very embarrassing. Very on brand for this podcast. Vanilla Ice. It's so sad. So sad. We left after like three songs because I was not prepared for the level of I mean I was like 9, 10 Catholic school girl who didn't know anything from anything, and I was not prepared for, South Florida rap style or whatever it was. 'Cause I remember him stuffing a towel down his pants and then pulling it out and flipping it around and throwing it out in the audience, and I was like, all right, it's time to go.
Oh
So
my.
ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. Plus, my mother's heart. She went along with me, and I think even she was like, "What is this?" I mean, there was no social media. There was no early warning for her on what that meant. I mean, all any of us
Oh,
knew was like Ice Ice Baby and the other one that hit the radio. I don't even think the Ninja Turtles song was out when that concert came by.
oh, that's so funny.
Oh yeah, so I outed myself
You
as a
grade them by
terrible.
like movies and give people a little bit of a break as far as
I
what they
know.
can expect.
Yes.
Well, you can only go up from there, anyways.
Yes. Yes. I saw much, much better concerts. The most recent concert, my husband and I went to see Foo Fighters
Up?
two years ago, which was
Mm,
awesome. It was
mm,
incredible. It
yeah.
was an amazing show.
But actually, a friend of mine is actually going to see at a fair Vanilla Ice and Young MC. So he's still out there. I wonder if he still does that.
I mean,
He's still doing
it's
that towel trick.
oh my God. It was
Video clip of
wild.
that.
It was wild. And it was one of those one of those moments. And then it was a little while before I saw a concert again.
Are they all like this?
Well, the redeeming because
Oh my.
Hershey Park Stadium, especially like in the 80s and early 90s, had some incredible acts come through. And one of the last concerts, so that probably happened in 87, 88. So when just before we moved to Cincinnati in 91, I mean, like literally days before we moved to Cincinnati in 91, Paul Simon was touring for his Concert in the Park, the
Huh?
91 version of Concert in the Park, where it was just him, not him and Garfunkel. And oh my God, that concert. What, I mean, top three. It was
Wow.
incredible. I mean, he was peak performance, all the beautiful songs, all the crowd favorites, ones off of his, Graceland album and Rhythm of the Saints. And yeah, I got the cassette tape that it was a double cassette tape that
Yeah.
that was when the album came out, and I got that for Christmas that year in Cincinnati, and I wore that thing out.
All right. Suzanne, did you have anything else for Lara?
Well, I think we definitely covered a lot. I think it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's first off, Trevor, you started off saying that the pen writers actually helped you a lot through your whole journey, and that it kind of warms my heart because being part of the organization, that it's true, it actually works. Like being able to support each other as
Mhm.
writers, um, it's necessary. I think we really need each other, and
Yes,
I'm glad that there's so many great people in the group that are able to kind of all lift each other up. And
yeah,
I was very happy to hear
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
That, kudos to you because I am definitely getting not just history in reading your book, but really a sense of family. I think
mm,
you're talented in being able to make all the characters feel real
mm,
and, like you said, capture their relationships, even if they were people who you didn't know personally.
hmm right.
That's very nice. There's a very nice quality to their relationship.
Oh,
In
thank you. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man. I love how it's not just about looking backwards, it's understanding where we came from so we can be better. So, yeah, appreciate where we are today. So, before we wrap up, where can everyone find Three Rivers Home and keep up with you?
well, Three Rivers Home, it's available. It's available through the Sunbury Press website. First off, that's my publisher, Sunbury Press Books, and I have an author page on their website, and then it's also available wherever you buy books. It is carried by the four major outlets that supply bookstores. So if your local bookstore does not have a copy, you can always ask them to order one, and it's available through some libraries. It is available through Cumberland County Library here in Pennsylvania, but again,
Mm.
it's easy enough to request it through your local library. If you're interested, just follow your local library's process for doing that, and then yeah, anywhere you buy books. And then I am Lara Brenckle Malmont across all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm Lara Brenckle on LinkedIn, but my author profiles are primarily on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.
All right.
And I do have my own website, larabrenklemalmont.com. And if you are interested, if folks are interested in basically retracing the journey of discovery, I have a blog. It's called findingphil.com. And that it basically goes from day one of, figuring out like, oh, I'm going to pursue this scenario to, basically signing my contract. That's the tagline at the top is in search of my grandfather's past and maybe a book deal, but I feel like I need to X out the maybe now at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, and then so that's everywhere you buy books and Lara Brenckle Malmont everywhere on the web.
Awesome. All right. And Suzanne, you want to tell people where they can find you?
Oh yeah, sure. On various platforms, Suzanne Mattaboni or Suzanne Greco Mattaboni. On Twitter, well, it's X these days, but it still sounds tweety to me. Yeah. On Facebook, on Instagram. Haven't been on TikTok for a while, but there's a few things out there. And at SuzanneMattaboni.com, which I'm going to be updating. My new short story collection is coming out in October, so I'm grabbing the mock-up because this is
Ooh,
the
nice.
that's kind of kind of new and exciting for me on my end. So that's actually available for pre-order. Yay! It's called Gore, Lust, and Kin, and it has horror stories, dysfunctional romance, romantic type of stories, and family stories, kind of divided into parts. But still trying to kind of reconcile that, like gore and relationship type conflicts, let's say. So it's an interesting read.
Awesome.
Awesome. I love it. All right. And thank you, Lara, for
Oh,
taking
thanks.
time with us today.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Suzanne. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, and Paul. Thank you. This was great to get to
Have a
know you
good day.
guys.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you both so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. And coming up at the end of the month, we'll be back with the Gen X Book Club. So looking forward to that. So, so we'll see you all real soon. Take care, everybody.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. Okay, I heard it say recording stop.
Oh, I gotta stop the. Ah, I gotta stop my Facebook feed. Oh, I got like a box. I'm still talking on Facebook, probably.